The time Californians went to war over eggs began here, in the bed of the American River. We have the aquatic realm to thank for setting off the cascade of events that would eventually lead us to the outbreak of war. But first we have some years before bloodshed would occur. For now, we commence with the starting date, January 24th, 1848, the day gold was discovered in California.
In 1848, gold is discovered on the West Coast. The land broadly west of Texas is called Alta California, and after the Mexican-American War, it becomes Yankee territory, and yanking is exactly what they did. From the American riverbed, a sawmill operator by the name of James W. Marshall yanked a glinting rock from the pole of the water. Half the size of a pea, the gold nugget Marshall held in his hand would alter the course of history, as his discovery would be publicized the world over.
They flew in from all over. Like the common mure, the destitute and luck-inspired migrated to California with an itch for gold. The majority were Americans from the eastern half of the continent, but gold seekers from Sonora, Chile, Italy, China, Brazil, Australia, Spain, the Ottoman Empire, the Caribbean, the Philippines, the world itself sought the mountain of gold in the newly American territory, and the miners got there before the state. Wild West is ill-defined in Eastern state education, but for a time between Native American residence and occupation of land and the ratification of statehood in 1850, California was in an unusual spot legally. The miners' union dispensed justice, and people acted without principles. This is the foundation for the Egg War. Accompanying this letter is the body of Edward Perkins, who was shot this morning by a party of men who attempted by force of arms to effect a landing on the island. Jacob Tasker, explaining an egg war death.
We focus our sights now on San Francisco, an unimportant and sleepy hamlet before the 24th of January 1848. But by 1850, just 2 years later, San Francisco had become overrun with miners and merchants, ballooning into the largest port on the West Coast. 300,000 people flooded California, many of them looking for the urban centers. But with so many mouths to feed, merchants found their riches in extorting prices for the essentials. From the get-go, 1 dozen eggs went for $1, which in today's rates makes it $30 a dozen. Housing became equally expensive, and a long-standing history of price gouging began. The riches seemed ever distant with rent at mortgage rates, and gold became harder and harder to grab. Seeing the merchants making real money, some miners turned to enterprise, establishing new lucrative business ventures wherever a grift could be grown. Yes, chicken eggs were in record demand, but conspicuously low supply. The beginning of the gold rush was not only the convergence of a massive number of people, but it also served as an intersection of peculiar moments in time. Right as Alta California populated, food supplies were becoming scarce. More people meant less food, and farmers could not keep up with such dramatic influx. What could keep up were the chickens, except for a peculiar drop in birth rates among West American coops. Chickens, after being eaten by early settlers and dealing with avian diseases, were also unable to keep up with demand, and soon even dairy products were rare. Grocers sent out advertisements in the newspaper. Wanted butter and eggs, for which the highest prices will be paid. With the dairy industry closed, some clever entrepreneurs recognized eggs as a freer resource for grabs. It didn't spill downstream in nuggets and flakes, but it was untapped income, and times were tough. The fun part of the egg war, in my opinion, is not that they fought over eggs, but where they fought over them. 25 miles off the coast of San Francisco were 200 acres of enormous granite daggers sticking straight up from the Pacific Ocean. These are the Farallon Islands, otherwise known as the Islands of the Dead. They host the largest continental seabird rookery south of Alaska, with those seabirds being the common murre, creatures similar to the penguin or seagull. Seagull. The first seafarers to find this mountain of eggs were Russian seal hunters, who were experienced in both sailing and rookery harvesting. However, the Russians had left Alta California after Mexican secession, and so the remote resource was again unclaimed. In this time, a Dr. Robinson was supposedly the first San Franciscan to collect the Farallon eggs. These came in the tens of thousands on the islands, with the murre population in the hundreds of thousands, while the eggs themselves were an alien delicacy. When fried, they have a blue transparent albumin and red-tinted yolks. In this form, they have a sickly fish-like taste, but when mixed into dough, the resulting baked good is indistinguishable from the regular. And while the common murre is smaller than the hen, their eggs are twice as large.
Dr. Robinson sailed back with his harvest, landing him almost $100,000 in today's money. He reportedly used that lump to start up an even more lucrative venture, a brothel. With egg money good enough to enter the sex ring, it became clear to those cutthroat that there was gold again in California, if you were man enough to take it. Some rough and tumble types took the opportunity, and in order to establish their remote rookery as their own personal claim, the Pacific Egg Company was born. Anyone who set foot on the islands besides members of the PEC were decidedly trespassing on private property. Kind of. At this point, the law was still shaky in California, so in order to legitimize their claim on the land, they had the county supervisor come out to the Farallons and issue them an approval to construct a school. They weren't intending on building a school, but they had in some way made the islands their own in an official capacity. And what land to behold! With nothing but jagged rock to land on, the harvesting of eggs was a difficult task due to the terrain. But these were tough, egging men. They would receive an executive order by President James Buchanan to stop bothering the lighthouse keeper who was just trying to do his job. They received this and went, "Ha! We are egging men, doing egg work on Egg Island. We have no need for a government." Egging was indeed hard work, as from May into the middle of June, the birthing season brought rigorous harvesting. Eggers were paid per egg collected, and many wore special egg shirts in order to carry them by the dozens. This man here is full to bursting with eggs, a hard day's work after being attacked by angry mothers at their nest and hungry seagulls from above, who would normally eat the murre eggs while in abundance. Being attacked and layered in both guano and bird excrement, the egging men were paid finely for their seasonal work and returned again and again for the opportunity it riches. In fact, many had tried at what the Pacific Egg Company conspired to keep their own, and it was with the help of a man named Ira Rankin that the PEC secured rights to the trade. Though he did this not in order to benefit the company, but to let the poor lighthouse keepers live without being bothered by other companies. With the government ill-prepared in the West and a shaky claim on the territory, the Farallons saw rival firms attempt to interrupt the egging process. Ira Rankin instructed Jacob Tasker, keeper of the Farallon Lighthouse, to do what he could to prevent the Pacific Egg Company from returning to the islands. It could be supposed that Jacob went against the wishes of Superintendent Rankin by inviting other eggers onto the land, as a party of armed men soon assumed possession of one island. Leading these men was a man named David Batchelder, and they intended on interfering with the business of the Pacific Egg Company so that they could cut their own profit. Rankin saw that the island had been invaded once again and summoned Lieutenant Charles Scammon, the commanding officer of a cutter ship called the Shubrick. Rankin asked Lieutenant Scammon to sail a Shubrick to the Farallons and arrest Batchelder, which was done without bloodshed. 5 shotguns, 1 rifle, and a few smaller arms were confiscated, but Batchelder would return a week later with more armed men. They again attempted to disturb the egging, but the Shubrick took them away once more, though this time they had been late enough as to allow Batchelder's men to assail the egg workers. Rankin recognized that someone in the lighthouse had been aiding and abetting the Batchelder bunch in their attempt to harm the PEC. He then instructed Lieutenant Scammon to double lookout in the bay. On June 2nd, an armed party of men set off from Jackson Street in San Francisco into the wharf, sailing a sloop out towards the Farallones. Someone alerted officials, and the Shubrick was en route to the Farallon Islands. Lieutenant Scammon encountered 2 boats at anchor, and the men aboard were interviewed. However, the lieutenant was given the story that these men were collecting eggs from the North Islands, and had no intent to interrupt nor disturb the egging operations of the Pacific Egg Company. This got them past the guard, and they were allowed to sail north. The Shubrick came across a 3rd vessel and similarly interviewed them, but were given the same cover story and allowed passage. Thanks to this, the Shubrick left the waters of the San Francisco Bay, and that evening 27 armed men sailed for the Farallones. Company foreman Isaac Harrington was made aware of their approach and had his eggers armed. They gathered behind defensive pillars and crests of granite, prepared for invasion. When Batchelder appeared at the makeshift dock, Harrington called to the party and warned them that their approach would be at their own peril. Batchelder replied that he'd land in spite of hell. They remained at a standstill that night and into the day after, but in the morning of June 4th, Batchelder launched his attack. As soon as the party set foot in the island, the company men fired on them. The invaders fired back from their boats, and across the barren rock echoed gunfire. A man named Edward Perkins was shot through the stomach on the first volley, and in the following shots, another worker named Angel Malo received a bullet to the throat. Many of Batchelder's men fell into the sea or slumped over the boats, and soon the remaining few fled the scene. The death count is undetermined, but David Batchelder was charged and convicted of murder in the aftermath. The gunfight had been the climax of the Egg War, and had seemingly settled the matter among the egging community on land ownership. The Pacific Egg Company had won rights to the land, and though they would soon sell those rights when chicken eggs returned to market shelves, the Egg War would leave the Muir and local sea lion populations devastated. Common practice in egging is to break as many as you can after collection so that upon a well-timed arrival, eggs will be fresh come next collecting day. The Pacific Egg Company would expand their operations shortly into seal clubbing before collapsing altogether. Thus is the end of the Farallon Egg War, and today the islands are forbidden entry by the United States government, who really won out in the end, though their egging numbers are drastically smaller than the PEC's. Pretty pathetic, even. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll make this short in case you have autoplay turned on. I have a Patreon linked below. I prefer that my content stay free, but I've had people ask at this point where they could donate. So there's a $5 tier, and that's it for now. If that gets to be enough, then I'll be able to release more content with high quality edits, blah, blah, blah. But my other socials are all down below, and check out the Discord. We're working on it right now, but it's a pretty fun place where you can be notified of what I'm up to. I still have more videos coming, and if this one does well, then I have more like it in store. I'm thinking about touching upon why the Russians were in North America to begin with. But that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and here comes the next video. It's coming up here, and it's gonna be, I'm gonna guess that it's about some kind of economic situation. I hope that I'm right. And if I'm right, go ahead and comment that Slazachov was right in the next video's comments below.